Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. And many more. And many more. And many more. Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. And I want to say welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shante Charles. Had a little bit of technical difficulty getting in today, but hopefully you can see and hear me on your end. There's a lot going on in the world today. One of those things that happened, excuse me for one moment. All right. Good morning again. One of the things that is happening in the world today that happened, I think, on yesterday afternoon, there was a plane that landed on top of someone's car in Miami on I-95. Who would have ever thought that we would be in a day and age where we had to worry about looking up in the sky and not for Superman, right? Unfortunately, this is increasingly becoming a problem because of who we have in office. There's no easier way to say that. And then news broke, also in Florida, about a formerly enslaved, unmarked, well, not necessarily unmarked, but um, undistinguished gravesite on a golf course right around the community where I used to live in Tallahassee has been sold to a white company. And citizens and community members are rightfully outraged because the community had no say and no input, even though the community rallied, even though the community made it known that they wanted these graves to be properly honored, acknowledged, and the such like. They went ahead with the sale of the land anyway. So that's what's happening in Tallahassee, Florida this morning. And about 14 years ago is when I lived in Tallahassee, and the Lord told us to move. Um, Part of that was for our spiritual calling, but also was part of that was because of the um, climate in Tallahassee. The climate, which is now bearing out in some very obvious ways to other people, but it wasn't very obvious when we left in 2011. And that is that the hands that move Tallahassee don't fully care about Black people in Tallahassee. And that is unfortunately that's the unfortunate reality. Um, they will placate Black Tallahasseans. They will smile with Black Tallahasseans. They will take pictures with them. They will even give you awards. But when it comes down to the power when it comes down to the decision making, like they're also about to sell the only state-run hospital in Tallahassee. I believe they're about to sell that to Florida State University, which is going to make it a private entity, which again is going to disenfranchise Black Tallahasseans. Um, so there's a lot of that happening in Tallahassee, where the people who are in power will placate Black Tallahasseans. But when it comes down to the real power moves and economic moves, um, and standing up for the preservation of Black history, Blackhood in Tallahassee, they fall short. And so um, I know a lot of the community there is irate right now. And the only thing that I would advise them to do is to be more than irate, but to organize and to coalesce all of that Black power that is there in Tallahassee and get serious about fighting for and preserving the things of Blackness in Tallahassee. There's a strong legacy of doing that there. Um, if you go back to the civil rights movement with C.K. Steele and some others that were leading movements in Tallahassee during the civil rights time, they have the history. They have the history. And I know plenty of attorneys there and judges um, and people who have the legal know-how. So I encourage you to not just let this be the last we hear of this, but to fight back. Fight back. Um, and don't let this be a moment of, oh, well, they just sold it. What do we do? But fight for those ancestors. Um, and I will say this, whoever bought that property, you are not going to know a moment's rest. Because the ancestors aren't going to let you know a moment's rest for buying that property. Just thought you should know. Because for some reason, people think that money is the only thing that moves things. But there's a whole spiritual world that moves beyond money. And so whoever thought that was a good idea to just sell off the ancestors to this company with no regard for the sacredness of that site, they're not going to have a moment of rest. And that's not a threat or anything. That's just, it is what it is. Okay? And speaking of which, let's get back to our readings for today. Reparations, a Christian call for repentance and repair. That's not what happened in Tallahassee, okay? That's not what happened in Tallahassee. And I'm sure these people were good Christians who did it. We are looking at, in this particular book, we're in the chapter entitled The Call to See. And we are in the midst of reading about racism as institutional injustice, as we just saw this morning in Tallahassee. Let us continue to read. And then we're going to move into racism as cultural disorder. We'll do those two today. Across the centuries, Americans have responded to various forms of institutional justice with extraordinary consistency, courage, and creativity. At the heart of these responses has been the work of not simply repentance or reconciliation, but reform, seeking to right specific institutional wrongs. This work of reform has addressed itself to a range of institutional injustices: to abolish slavery, to secure African Americans the right to vote, which they are now trying to strip from us, to provide equal educational opportunities, which they are now trying to strip from us, to abolish prejudicial lending and housing practices, to which now many Americans are about to be disadvantaged by what they are trying to put out with the 50-year mortgage, and to reform the practices of criminal justice, to name only a few. This history of reform has inspired our own work to address injustices in each of the discrete institutions in which we ourselves have served. And yet we remain aware of the fact that this too is the product of a particular way of seeing racism in America as a form of institutional injustice that calls forth the work of reform. Each of these ways of seeing and responding to race in America is probably familiar to the reader. Each of them is, in its own way, a crucial part of truly understanding the dynamics of race in America. We do carry personal prejudices that call for the work of repentance. We do have broken relationships that call for the work of reconciliation. And we do have institutional injustices that call for the work of reform. Even so, as important as these perspectives are, both individually and in aggregate, they fail to offer a full picture of race in America. More importantly, they fail to act in the way that a fuller picture would demand. Because this, we wish here and in the chapters to follow to suggest a fourth way of seeing race in America that, though including the others, overcomes their limitations, leading us not simply to repentance, reconciliation, and reform, but beyond them to repair. Racism as cultural disorder. This is going to be good because I've been having this conversation since probably the weekend, coming into this week. And I've been telling people, as a Black and Indigenous woman who has been not only the descendants of the formerly enslaved and the indigenous, but who has lived through 48 years of being in America and having experienced racism from as early as 4 years old into the present day. So I've got 44 years under my belt of living in America with 3 Ks. When I try to tell people that America is not ready for certain things, people want to come and talk to me like racism for me is a sociology paper, like it is a research paper, like it is an experiment. It's not. It's a lived experience. So when I say things like, this country is not ready for a woman president, especially a Black woman president, and that I agree with Michelle Obama. I agree with her on that point. Doesn't mean I agree with her on everything she says. But when I agree with that point, and then someone comes and tells me I don't know what I'm talking about, I just laugh. And I'm just like, well, y'all are going to find out again, yet again, that this country is not ready. I didn't say that the country was not ready for a Black man. We've had a Black man. So we know it's not that. It's not ready for a Black woman. Keyword there being woman. They also showed you they were not ready for a woman when they refused to elect a white woman either. All right. So when you have the intersection of those two, you see very quickly that if they weren't willing to elect a white woman, they certainly aren't willing to elect a Black woman. They're not ready yet. And the person asked me, well, why do you think they're not ready yet? I said, because America is still lying to itself about who it really is. And until we get to that point where this country stops lying to itself about who it is and what it stands for, we will not be ready. Other countries have been willing to reckon face to face with their past, with the inhumanity of it all, with the genocidal practices of it all. They've been willing to actually make strides so that those things don't rise to power again in their country because they're aware that it could very well try to rise again. This country is in denial. And because we're in denial, we're literally seeing the rise of all these things that we pretend to not have a problem with in our country. So, no, we are not ready. Now, racism is cultural disorder. In 2015, journalist Ta-Nehisi Coates published a book entitled Between the World and Me, which we read here many seasons ago. This book, framed as a letter to his son about the experience of being Black in America, was part autobiography, part social history, part, part fatherly exhortation, and part lament. But it was all fire. At the time, Coates was already well known because of his memoir, The Beautiful Struggle, and the articles he published in The Atlantic, most notably The Case for Reparations. But Between the World and Me amplified his voice to an international audience. His book renders a poet's eye, a theorist's mind, and a father's heart in language that is at times equal in beauty and power to any in American letters. But in the years since its publication, something else, something more fundamental to the work than even these things, has captured the imaginations of his readers. In private interviews and in public town halls across the world, it seems that his audiences want to hear him talk almost exclusively about one thing: his view of racism. For many of us, the notion that we would need to write a letter to our children to guide them through the perils of American racism seems remote, perhaps even unimaginable. But for Coates, it is essential. For him and for his son, this is the work of survival. He offers his child not a philosophical, but what might best be described as a visceral account of American racism. He struggles to take the chaotic and bewildering phenomena of his body, of his streets, of his life, and of his son's life and make them visible, intelligible, and actionable. He does so in hopes that his son might, in the fullest sense, live. His account of American racism is, in other words, not the academic musing of the social theorist, but the guidance of a desperate, loving father. To understand this account, it's important to understand three important ideas embedded within it. The first of these is that American society inextricably creates and promotes white people through violence against Black and brown people. Now, we have seen this over and over and over again in the last year, where people have gotten more publicity for enacting violence against Black and brown people, for enacting verbal violence against Black and brown people. We just had a new one where the woman was calling people the N-word and saying, basically she's proudly racist. And yeah, she lost her job making minimum wage, making Cinnabons, but now she's raised close to $100,000. So somebody in our system is propping her up, right? They're making her monetarily sound by her violence against Black and brown people. Just any old day in America. America, as we know it, is impossible apart from this violence. As Coates put it, America was not achieved through wine tastings and ice cream socials, but rather through the pillaging of life, liberty, labor, and land, through the flaying of backs, the chaining of limbs, the strangling of dissidents, the destruction of families, the intimate assault of mothers, and the sale of children. The cultural miracle of a free and prosperous white America, a foundational element of the American dream, depended on the creation of an enduring cultural nightmare of bondage and poverty for African Americans. One might call it the parallel America. The second of his core ideas is that even as America kidnaps, enslaves, tortures, and exploits, it needs to see itself as innocent. And this is what I keep saying. To believe in the very face of this bondage that it is the land of the free. And until America reckons with its um, kidnapping, enslaving, torturing, and exploiting of people in order to prop up the idea of the dream, until America deals with that, we will not be ready for a Black female leader. Again, Coates says, America believes itself exceptional, the greatest and noblest nation ever to exist, a lone champion standing between the white city of democracy and the terrorists, despots, barbarians, and other enemies of civilization. There exists all around us an apparatus urging us to accept American innocence at face value and not to inquire too much. It is that accepting at face value that people want to maintain as we blow up boats in the middle of the ocean, claiming without any proof, without any evidence, that we're doing the good thing by getting rid of these boats with the people on them. They don't want you to peer too much into the face value of America being good, America being the good guys. They don't want you to inquire too much about the facade and peel it back. Much like the sanitation workers in Memphis, Coates accuses white America of a form of willful blindness, and I'm going to agree with him. A sustained commitment to shelter its own brutality under the cloak of myth, and I'm going to agree with him. What Coates refers to as the dream. His third core claim is that the only way to live with integrity is to wake from this dream, to resist its manifold forms of temptation, and to take our place in the midst of the struggle for our own humanity against the forces of this history. And I'm going to say against the forces of this idealized history. As he tells his son, I did not want to raise you in fear or false memory. I did not want you forced to mask your joys and blind your eyes. What I wanted for you was to grow into consciousness. If my life ended today, I would tell you it was a happy life, that I drew great joy from the study, from the struggle toward which I now urge you. The changes have awarded me a rapture that comes only when you can no longer be lied to, when you have rejected this dream. And I'm going to say false dream. Mhm. This, for Coates, is the only path to a life of freedom, to strip away the vanities embedded in our mythological cultural identities and to struggle as free people against the terror of our inheritance. Taken together, these claims indicate a belief that American racism is not simply a personal prejudice, a relational division, or a specific institutional injustice, but something much more profound. Specifically, racism is an entire culture, a comprehensive way of being and doing that is embedded in our structures of meaning, morality, language, and memory, and expressed in our patterns of individual, social, and institutional behavior. At this point, it seems important for us to say two things. First, in saying that racism is fundamental to American culture, we do not intend to say that racism is the only thing fundamental to it, reducing American culture just to racism. Second, we do intend to say that racism is not incidental, but elemental to American culture, that it goes all the way down. In other words, though one can conceptually distinguish racism from other energies in American life, it is also the case that historically speaking, these things have been functionally indivisible. Racism is best understood when seen not simply in individual, relational, or discrete institutional terms, but in comprehensive cultural terms, a perspective we will develop more fully in our next two chapters. Since the publication of Coates' book, people have criticized his account of racism as fundamental to American culture as an overly reductive and cynical account of American cultural history. His view has also been called a basic failure of political hope. It might even be that some of our readers will be concerned about our decision to appeal to Coates. concerned that we have fully aligned ourselves with his intellectual project and that we are therefore subject to those same criticisms. Well, yes and no. First, the no. Coates is straightforward about his hopelessness regarding the healing of America's profound racial wounds. When he looks at American culture, he simply does not see the grounds for such hope. We, on the other hand, have deep hope. We believe that what has been made can be unmade. We believe that what has been hidden can be unveiled. We believe that what has been broken can be made whole. This very book is an expression of that hope. But crucially, our hope comes not from wishful optimism about the institutions, nor from a blind faith in the inevitable triumph of democracy. Our hope rather comes from our belief in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. We have hope because we believe that there is a God and that this God does love the entire world, hates injustice, and promises healing of all things. God has demonstrated this in the life, death, and resurrection and ascension of Christ. This is the source of our deep political hope. In this, we differ significantly, though respectfully, from Coates. Now, the yes. We agree with Coates' claim that racism is not anomalous, but essential to the culture. While this claim may be disconcerting to some of us, the truth is that this perspective is not unique to him or us. Since the beginning of the American Republic, this view that America is a racist cultural order has been echoed time and again, becoming an enduring theme in American social and political history. It was echoed by Gouverneur Morris, who at the Constitutional Convention argued that the adoption of slavery made America a cursed nation. It was echoed by David Walker, a free African American from North Carolina turned Boston abolitionist, who in his 1829 appeal said that American racism tempted the just judgment of God and invited its own destruction. It was echoed by William Lloyd Garrison, a prominent abolitionist who described the American slaveholding nation as the empire of Satan. It was echoed by Frederick Douglass, who in 1847 said, I have no love for America as such. I have no patriotism. I have no country. The institutions of this country do not know me, do not recognize me as a man, except as a piece of property. It was echoed by Ida B. Wells, 19th century journalist, suffragist, and anti-lynching activist, who said that the power of white America had come by means of fraud, violence, intimidation, and murder. Thank you, Ida. It was echoed by Malcolm X, who in 1964 described racism as, quote, the cancer that is destroying America. And it was echoed by Martin Luther King Jr., who in a Memphis speech given the night before his death told his audience that, quote, the nation is sick. Each of these and many others like them, while seeing racism in America as a personal prejudice, relational estrangement, and institutional injustice, also indeed primarily saw racism as more than this. They saw racism as a culture, a disorder at the heart of the American nation. In this respect, Coates's work, though singularly powerful, echoes the voices throughout American history that have called us to see racism in this way, voices that we ourselves echo in this book. This different way of seeing racism serves as the foundation for this work. Racism is not simply a matter of personal prejudice, relational division, institutional injustice, but rather a fundamental cultural disorder that is both the source and sum of all of these. Because of this, personal repentance, relational reconciliation, and institutional reform, though important, are not enough. Indeed, can never be enough to overcome its power. Because racism is a comprehensively broken culture, what is needed if we are to truly heal is comprehensive cultural repair. And when you start talking about cultural repair, now you're going to start to see some pushback. The last section here is called The Struggle to See. And we are going to let that be our last segment before we break for the winter. on next week. All right. I think this is a good stopping place. Pastor Ben, I do want to bring you on to talk about this idea of racism as cultural disorder and to give us your thoughts. All right, I have sent you the link. And good morning to those of you who are coming in. Racism as cultural disorder. And the reality is, we have to want to repair the culture. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Can you see and hear me?
Good morning. I can barely hear you.
All right, I'll go ahead and let you talk. Um, and hopefully you can hear me a little bit better now.
I hear you. I hear you much better right now.
Okay, great.
But you grew up in the well, I started to say 954 to 305,
Mm-hmm.
which is the next door neighbor to the 954.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and here you couldn't help but experience racism,
Mm-hmm.
especially back when you were in your time and my time growing up here. That was a major thing that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And Florida still have South Florida
Mm-hmm.
still have sundown towns.
Yeah.
One of the most popular ones was the city of well, the town of Davie.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we experienced that. We understood that don't be caught in that area after sundown. That was KKK territory.
I'm trying to think of the other place. Um, it was connected to Homestead. Parts of Homestead were seen as sundown town areas, but even further
Hmm.
than Homestead was a area called the Redlands in South
Hmm.
Florida. Every Most black people that I knew growing up knew about the Redlands being super racist and an area where Klans persons were active. Um, and I will say the interesting thing about Miami was yes, you grew up with lots of different cultures, right? You were surrounded by different cultures. But also, having grown up in Miami, I understood that it wasn't just what I would say black and white racism, but there was also strong prejudices between Black Americans and Caribbean Americans. Um, so, as a Black person, I experienced racism from Black people, racism from Ashkenazim, because where I lived across the tracks from us were Jewish communities, and the Jewish communities there didn't want to fool up with Black people, especially not poor Black people. So I got it from the white people. I got it from the Ashkenazim. Um, Within our communities, there were divisions of Bahamians, Jamaicans, Haitians, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, some Mexicans, although most of them were in Homestead when I lived there, and then the influx of Cubans. So it
Hmm.
wasn't just experiencing prejudice from white people and most of the Jewish community in South Florida at the time. It was also, I'm not black like you're black.
Hmm.
So I had friends that were Caribbean, but a lot of Caribbean people did not fool up with Black Americans, not in the ways they do now. And I'm like,
Right.
some of y'all have some revisionist history going on, because I remember when my friends, some of their Caribbean parents were like, don't hang out with that Black American girl. Like, that was also going on. With the Latin communities, same thing. They were very insular in their cultures, and they didn't necessarily want to fool up with Black Americans. Um, Obviously, this comes much later, after what we know about the Seminole Wars and things like that. Um, I would say that culture of helping each other to come against the other was eroded by the time I'm being born in the 70s, in 1977. Um, and so I grew up in that history of South Florida being a beautiful cultural mix, but also at the same time understanding that people, even within those cultures, were anti-Black. So I grew up with racial prejudice and anti-Blackness from people who also were Black, who looked like me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up understanding that and knowing, like, listen, you don't want to identify with Black America, right? But eventually you're going to get your wake up call in this country. And I feel like what we're seeing now is sort of the coalescing of that wake up call. That a lot of people who felt like they were outside of or above the kind of pressure that was being put on Black Americans this entire time, I feel like some of those people are finally waking up to understand that they see us all the same,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
I agree because I experienced a lot of that same stuff. People from the Caribbean saw themselves as better or different, looked down on the Black Americans. Uh, but I will say this, as you said, the younger ones have come with a different energy,
Mm-hmm.
and even with the Latin community, because there are those that realize and they try to teach their people that if it hadn't been for blacks, they wouldn't be enjoying the freedom that they did until this guy got elected.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're pushing that. They understand who we are. They understand the struggles that we went through. They understand that if we ain't got it, nobody else got it.
Right. Right.
That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have it, you don't have it.
And I don't and I think that some of it is a false sense of security. I think I want to say that. A false sense of
Hmm.
security when you see yourself elevating above Black people, right? Not realizing that you are being used as sort of a, how can I say it? You're being used by white society many times almost as a mockery and as a, um I'm trying to look for the word I want, almost to say, like, look, we're going to use this group of people instead of you, right? But that group of people doesn't realize they're being used as a way to, that's the word I'm looking for, antagonize Black America.
Hmm.
And because they don't realize that they're being used to antagonize us, sometimes they feel that, oh, I'm getting these things because I'm better than you. It's like, no,
Hmm.
you're being used to be an antagonistic tool against Black America. But the reality is, when they get done using you as an antagonistic tool, they're going to treat you just like they treat Black Americans. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Hmm.
We're at the
Yeah.
finding out part that America has mainly been using you all as antagonistic tools against Black America. And some people fell into the assumption that because they were being used, they were better. That wasn't it. You were being used because they want to use you as an antagonistic tool. And now that they have taken power at the helm, they don't necessarily need to use you anymore in that role. Hence, you have to go.
Mhm.
That's where we are.
The
And here's the
crazy
thing.
part.
I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
say, and here's
Go
the
ahead.
thing. When black people tried to tell some of y'all that you were being used as an antagonistic tool against black Americans, you want to say, oh, no, 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 no. That's not what it is. Y'all are just jealous of us. No. We knew what the real deal was. We knew they were using you as antagonistic tools.
Hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And what's crazy, he told y'all that we're going to deport you. After you vote for us, we're going to deport you. They said it loud and clear. We heard it,
Mm-hmm.
but you all were too busy with your head in the clouds thinking that you were better. So you missed it. See, we understand what they say when they say it.
Mm-hmm.
We've been dealing with it for a long time.
Yep.
See, we hear what's exactly behind what they're saying because we have that experience.
Yep.
See, we were never, they never used us, well, they used us, yeah, I'm not going to say they never used us, but not to the extent that they use everybody else, because they use everybody else to antagonize us.
Mm-hmm.
They use us to pull some more of us into their side. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And now our eyes are open to those that they are using to try and pull us over to their side. Like they pay these black folks to switch over to Republican Party
Mm-hmm.
and talk bad about the Democratic Party, talk about slavery. And I say, okay, who's removing African American history from schools? Who's attacking critical race theory? Who's rolling back civil rights? Get away from me with the foolishness, because I can see. I'm woke. The word that y'all hate, I'm woke. See, I can actually see what's happening. I don't pay attention to, I don't focus on what you're saying and let that draw me. I pay more attention to what I'm actually seeing. And that's where we lose it at. Too many people are just listening and ignoring what they're actually experiencing and seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was the Republicans that freed slaves. Strom Thurmond, not Strom Thurmond, Bull O'Connor. What's Thurmond to? Bull O'Connor. Let, but the rest followed.
Mm-hmm.
They crossed lines and became Republican. I posted 5 names. I said, I can give you 5. I said, now look them up. It's that easy.
And the other point is the Republican Party of King, because King was a Republican. The Republican Party of King is not the Republican Party of today.
Nope, definitely not.
That's again a history thing.
Hmm.
when black
Mhm.
men got the opportunity to vote at that point in time, they were Republicans. Again, it's not the same party of today.
Mm-mm.
So just going by the name, and then we know, of course, with American history, um, party ideology and name don't always go and fit together because they were changing. So I'm
Mhm.
like, are we not understanding history? Are we not reading books? Like, what is going on here?
No,
I'm
they're
like,
not reading books.
do you know about the lily white people? These were the people
Mm-mm.
that were throwing out the black Republicans. I mean, if we're gonna talk, you gotta go all the way through. Gotta finish the sentence.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think this book is interesting, and we're reading it because this was published and put out in 2020, and I'm glad they put this out. You know what? Because what this shows you is there's a record now of Christians who recognized that they needed to wake up and repair Black America. Now the question is whether they still feel that way. We have the proof in writing that they knew it was time. That 2020 was an eye-opening moment for this nation to wake up and start repairing.
Mhm.
Now some people have gone backwards and try to pretend like they had no clue that that was a wake-up call for them to start repairing, and other people are continuing on with the need for repair. Final thoughts as we wrap up today.
Mhm.
Final thoughts.
Well, I'm gonna leave you with this because I want to speak on this person in Tallahassee. But I call him Byron Donald's son.
Uh-huh.
His daddy's home. He's one of those that's been used
Mm-hmm.
against his people,
Yeah.
and willingly so, willingly so, and that's the crazy part. And but at the end of the day, his skin tone is his skin tone. So, and that's what matters to them. That's what matters. Are you that light shade? Are you lily white? Because if not, you don't belong with us. And that's what people don't. They need to wake up and understand that. Care about you. So let's wake up. Let's realize what's going on, and let's pull together. Especially people of color. Let's all pull together because they don't want any of us.
And that is the truth. And that is the truth. I want to thank you for sharing that. Um, I'm reading some things coming out of Tallahassee from the black community there. People are outraged, and unfortunately, I happen to know in passing two of the people who are on the wrong side of history with this sale. The commissioners, it was five commissioners. I'm just looking at the write up here. It was five commissioners. Three of them voted yes to the sale. Two of them voted no. Yeah. So Their names are out here. People now know what, and I'm gonna read the names because it needs to be on record. The yes vote for selling the black bodies came from Diane Williams Cox, black woman, Curtis Richardson, black man, and John Daly, the mayor of Tallahassee. The people who voted no on the sale, Commissioner Jack Porter and Jeremy Matlow. So the only two black commissioners that Tallahassee has voted yes to sell black bodies. They voted with the white mayor that I've been side eyeing for a very long time. They voted with the white mayor yes to sell the resting place where enslaved black persons' remains are. Let the record show. And I know many of my friends in Tallahassee are outraged by what has gone down, but it's done. So at this point, now they got to go through the legal route to see if they can stop it. Because really,
Mm-hmm.
that site should have been preserved as a sacred burial ground.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see them selling Native American burial grounds to white
Nope.
developers and getting away with it?
Nope. Ain't gonna happen.
So if we don't stand for us, then who will? Yeah. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I have been your host today, Shante Charles. I want to thank you for your time and for your attention. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to evil, and that means if you're a light bearer, you have to stand up and be what?
Light.
Light. Take care, everyone. Be well, and most importantly, be